Throughout their careers, Jim Carrey and Jimmy Kimmel have been beloved names in the entertainment world. Known for their wit, boldness, and willingness to dive into political commentary, they've often made waves by satirizing conservative figures. Their sharp jokes and playful mockery have been a staple of late-night TV, particularly on Jimmy Kimmel Live. But this time, their usual humor crossed a line, and Leavitt, the youngest press secretary in U.S. history, was ready to respond, with no mercy. On that fateful evening, during a live broadcast, Kimmel and Carrey, with an air of disdain, mimicked Leavitt's voice, mocked her faith, and called her the White House's talking doll. They believed it was harmless fun, just part of their usual comedic banter. But what they didn't know was that they had triggered a confrontation they weren't prepared for. Every mocking word, every sneer, Leavitt remembered it all, and her response would shake Hollywood to its core. Before we dive deeper into this, comment below where you're watching from and don't forget to hit subscribe to stay up to date with the latest stories. Under the bright lights of the studio, with upbeat music and applause, the evening felt like a typical Hollywood comedy show. The iconic set, with its inviting sofa next to the host's desk, was a place where stars often joked about the latest political issues. But tonight, things were different. This wasn't just another night of laughs. Tonight, the audience wasn't here just for entertainment. They were about to witness something much bigger. A showdown between politics and humor, MAGA versus Hollywood. On stage, Jimmy Kimmel, the seasoned late-night host with his signature grin, was ready for a verbal duel. Beside him, Jim Carrey, the comedian known for his explosive energy, sat in the guest chair, a sketchpad in hand, ready to draw his next satire. But standing in the middle of it all was Leavitt. No Hollywood star, no comedian, just the youngest press secretary the White House had ever seen. Kimmel and Carrey, likely seeing Leavitt as an easy target, thought they could get away with a few jabs aimed at her age. Little did they know, they had just set off a fuse that would lead to an explosive retaliation. Kimmel, lounging comfortably in his chair, smirked as he addressed Leavitt. "Leavitt, let's be honest," he began, his tone condescending like he was speaking to a child. "You're 27, right? At that age, people are still figuring out Instagram filters, and yet here you are running the White House press room. Isn't that like handing the keys to a spaceship to someone who just got their learner's permit?" The audience burst into laughter. Some even pulled out their phones to record, clearly anticipating a moment of embarrassment for Leavitt. Carrey, standing by his sketchpad, joined in. He held up a caricature of Leavitt, a young woman in a schoolgirl jacket carrying a backpack standing at the White House podium. The caption read, "Trump's intern." Carrey looked over at Leavitt, feigning innocence. "I gotta ask," he said with a gleam in his eye, "how does it feel to be an intern at the most important job in the country?" But this time, Leavitt wasn't just going to stand there and take it. Did you get hired because of a PowerPoint presentation about Trump in school? Or because you knew how to write manga in perfect cursive? The crowd erupted in laughter, some clapping and even whistling as if they were witnessing a top-tier verbal showdown. Carrey shrugged, pretending to be humble, but his eyes betrayed his triumph. Leavitt, however, remained calm. Her hands rested lightly on the chair, and her gaze swept over both Kimmel and Carrey like a strategist assessing a battlefield. She didn't flinch or frown, just a powerful, composed calm. Noticing the silence, Kimmel gestured for her to respond. "Come on, Leavitt," he said, his tone almost mocking. "What do you think? Playing in the White House at 27, isn't that a bit overwhelming?" He tilted his head, clearly expecting an awkward reaction, a moment where the young woman would falter live in front of millions. But Leavitt had a different plan. She stood up and walked to the center of the stage, the spotlight on her like a halo. She gripped the microphone firmly, her voice sharp and commanding. "Jimmy, you think 27 is too young to run a press room?" She paused, letting the audience hang on her words. "Then let's talk about how I've been working in the White House since 2019, while you were probably busy reading comedy scripts to chase views." Scattered applause broke out, catching Kimmel off guard. the smile on his face beginning to fade. Leavitt turned to face Carrey, her gaze sharp and focused. "And you, Jim, drawing me as a schoolgirl with a backpack? I've coordinated media, campaigns for Trump, stood by him through every political storm, while you're just drawing cartoons for social media likes. If you want to talk about experience, take a look at your own career. It needs a boost more than mine." The audience gasped, and applause quickly drowned out the initial laughter. Some people were even on their feet, cheering as if watching a boxing match. Carrey, pen in hand, froze, his eyes betraying a rare hint of embarrassment. Leavitt stepped closer to his sketchpad, pointing directly at the caricature. "This isn't me. This is your stereotype of youth. But let me tell you the truth. Age doesn't define ability. I've built my career on sweat and truth, not cheap jokes." She turned to the audience, her voice growing magnetic. "I represent a young generation that doesn't wait for permission. We act, we win. And tonight I'm here to prove it." The studio erupted. The audience stood and clapped furiously. Kimmel, for the first time that night, looked flustered. He forced a smile and motioned for the band to play a quick interlude, trying to cut through the tension. But the crowd wasn't with him anymore. Leavitt had won them over. Carrey, still by his sketchpad, quietly folded the caricature, as if conceding his first defeat. Kimmel, trying to regain control, said, "Wow, Leavitt, you're something." His voice was slightly off. "But don't you think you need a few more years, to build experience?" He shrugged, hoping the audience would rally back to him. But Leavitt isn't backing down. "Experience, Jimmy?" She stepped closer to his desk, resting her hand on its edge and locking eyes with him. "I learned from experience working 18-hour days, facing a left-wing press trying to twist the truth. I learned from experience standing by Trump through every battle, from courtrooms to campaigns, and you? Your experience is reading comedy scripts and thinking that's enough to take me down." She shook her head, her voice full of authority. "I don't need more years. I've been ready for a long time." Leavitt turned to the audience, raising the microphone one final time. "Youth is a weapon, not a weakness," she declared, her voice ringing through the studio. "I'm not here to be mocked. I'm here to fight. And you, Jim, picked the wrong person to provoke." She set the microphone down, walked back to her seat, and left the audience in a frenzy of cheers. At that moment, the stage belonged to Leavitt. She had turned their mockery of her youth into a blaze that burned. Through Kimmel and Carrey's arrogance, the studio shook with the aftershocks of Leavitt's razor-sharp comeback, transforming their age-based jabs into an overwhelming performance that captured the audience's hearts. Kimmel, rattled, tried to maintain his host charm. Carrey, his confidence shaken, stood by his sketchpad, eager to land a new blow. Kimmel adjusted his tie, forcing a strange smile to mask his unease. "All right, Leavitt, let's talk about your unique approach to the press," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've turned the White House press room into a TikTok stage, inviting influencers to dance around while dodging real journalists. Is that your grand plan? Running the press like a reality TV show?" Kimmel quipped, and the audience erupted in laughter. Shouts of "TikTok Queen" echoed through the studio, phones lighting up as viewers rushed to record the moment. Carrey seized the energy, flipping his sketchpad to reveal a fresh caricature. Leavitt decked out in sparkly influencer gear, holding a selfie stick in front of a White House plastered with hashtags like Mega Vibes and Trump Talk. "Leavitt, I got to hand it to you," Carrey said, feigning admiration. "Other press secretaries deal with boring newspapers. You're running a full-blown social media circus. What's next? Live streaming briefings with a cat ear filter?" The crowd roared, clapping and whistling wildly. Carrey strutted across the stage, mimicking an exaggerated TikTok dance, driving the audience into another frenzy. They were convinced they had turned Leavitt's media approach into a joke. But Leavitt remained still, her fingers lightly tapping her chair, her face calm, like a silent storm gathering strength. She wasn't just listening, she was strategizing. She paused at the edge of the stage, bathed in light, gripping the microphone as her voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Jimmy, you call my press room a reality show?" she began, her tone low but slicing through the noise like a blade. "It's not a show, it's a revolution. While you're clinging to outdated media, I'm speaking directly to millions of Americans who've lost faith in your so-called real journalists. My briefings aren't for the elite, they're for the people." Kimmel stiffened, his hand tightening around his pen. Leavitt turned to Carrey, pointing directly at the caricature. "And you, Jim, think my style is a circus? Look at your own. Decades playing a clown, now just drawing cartoons for clicks. Don't need a selfie stick to make an impact. My voice carries further than your entire film catalog." She strode across the stage, each step more confident than the last. "You mock me for inviting TikTok creators? Those creators have the authenticity. Your media lost a long time ago. They speak truths without fear, unlike the newspapers you worship, twisting facts for their own agenda." She paused, letting her words settle. "I've opened the White House to real voices. Voices you ignore. And guess what? They're listening. My posts reach millions. Your show, Jimmy? Struggling outside the top 10. The crowd exploded, applause crashing. Like waves against the walls. Kimmel pursed his lips, fingers drumming his desk, visibly rattled. Desperate to reclaim control, Carrey jumped in. "Come on, Leavitt. You're not a press secretary. You're a fan page manager for Trump's fan club. Calling the press fake news doesn't make you smart. It just makes you a punchline." He pointed at the caricature again, hoping to turn the tide. But Leavitt didn't flinch. She stepped toward the sketch pad, standing tall in front of it. "A punchline? Jim, I'll take it. Because my punchline spreads truth faster than your drawings ever will. Fake news? I call it what it is. Propaganda disguised as journalism. I face it every day while you hide behind a paintbrush." She turned to the audience, her voice rising with a fierce energy. "My job isn't to cozy up to lying media. My mission is to amplify the voices they try to silence. That's why I bring the truth straight to the people. No newsroom required." The crowd roared again, rising to their feet and chanting her name. "Leavitt! Leavitt!" Kimmel, caught off guard by the tidal wave of support, tried to interrupt. "All right, Leavitt, but aren't you just chasing likes? You've turned the White House into a content factory," he said, his voice betraying his unease. Leavitt spun around, her eyes blazing. "Chasing likes, Jimmy?" she shot back. "I'm speaking to the people you forgot, workers, parents, veterans, Americans who deserve to be heard. My so-called content factory is stronger than your media empire." She held up her phone high. "Millions are watching. They're sharing my words, not yours. That's not chasing likes, that's building power." Behind her, the giant screen lit up, flashing her posts filled with praise for her resilience. Kimmel, now visibly flustered, tried to pivot again. "Wow, Leavitt, you're passionate," he said, forcing a strained smile. But it was no use. The audience wasn't his anymore. They belonged to Leavitt. Carrey, silent for the first time, crossed his arms, the forgotten caricature drooping at his side. Leavitt stepped back to center stage, lifting the microphone one last time. "This isn't about TikTok or hashtags," she said, voice steady and commanding. "This is about reclaiming the narrative from gatekeepers like them." She pointed at Kimmel and Carrey. "I'm not here to please them. I'm here to break the mold, and every American watching tonight knows exactly why." She dropped the microphone, and the studio erupted in a thunderous standing ovation. Kimmel, with a forced smile, tried to mask the defeat written across his face. Carrey, gripping his pen tightly, no longer dancing, stood quietly, his gaze heavy with weariness. Kimmel's eyes glinted, though, as if he had spotted one last opening. "Leavitt, I've got to hand it to you," he said, his voice sweet but dripping with something sharper underneath. "You've got energy. But let's talk about this," Kimmel said, leaning forward with a sly grin. "You're Trump's spokesperson, right? I mean, you follow him like a fan chasing an idol. Don't you ever think about standing on your own?" The audience chuckled. A few clapped, sensing Kimmel's jab. He smirked. proud as if he'd just landed a crushing blow. Carrey, sensing an opening, flipped his sketchpad to a new caricature. Leavitt in a Trump t-shirt, clutching a massive Trump sign, standing dwarfed behind a towering Trump statue like a national monument. "Leavitt, I get it," Carrey said, voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Working for Trump must be like joining a cult, right? Just nod and say, 'Yes, sir,' every day. When do you actually get to have your own opinion?" Leavitt sat still, hands resting lightly on her lap, gaze unwavering. Her face was calm, but a fire was clearly kindling behind her eyes. Kimmel cleared his throat, sensing something brewing, and gestured for her to respond. "Leavitt, what do you think? Trump's person or your own?" he asked, tilting his head, expecting her to stumble. Leavitt rose slowly, the stage lights bathing her in a golden halo. She gripped the microphone, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Jimmy," she began, her voice steady but fierce, "you think my loyalty to Trump is a weakness?" She paused, letting the question hang in the air. "I call it conviction. I stand with a man who's fought for America, for values you mock because you'll never understand them. I'm not a fan. I'm an ally of the truth." She turned sharply, facing Carrey, her eyes piercing straight through his caricature. "And you, Jim, you think I just nod along? I stood with Trump during the darkest days when the world turned its back. I didn't nod. I stood. I fought. I won. What about you? Who are you loyal to, besides your own ego?" The audience gasped, a wave of applause crashing over the studio. Leavitt paced slowly across the stage, her voice swelling with the power of a seasoned orator. "You mock me for loyalty. I'm proud of it. Proud to stand with someone who dared to challenge the elites, the media snobs like you who sneer at everyday Americans. You want me to stand alone? No. I stand with millions who believe in a stronger, freer America." She stopped center stage, her voice thundering. "Loyalty isn't slavery, it's the strength to fight for change, together." Kimmel, trying to regain ground, jumped in. "Leavitt, but I mean, don't you ever question Trump? Or do you just follow orders?" he asked with a forced chuckle. But Leavitt stepped closer to his desk, her eyes blazing. "Question, Jimmy?" she shot back. "I question every day how the media like yours twists the truth, how Hollywood mocks people like me. But Trump, I don't need to question his fight. I see it with my own eyes. I choose to stand with him, not because of orders, but because of belief." She raised her hand, her voice sharp as steel. "And you? Who are you loyal to, Jimmy? The audience paying you to read their scripts?" The crowd burst into laughter, this time at Kimmel's expense. His fingers tapped nervously against the desk. Carrey, desperate, tried to recover. "Leavitt, you talk a good game, but loyalty to Trump just makes you his mouthpiece. Don't you have your own opinions?" he said, jabbing at the caricature again. "But..." Leavitt smiled coolly. "His mouthpiece, Jim?" she repeated. "No, I'm the voice of millions you refuse to hear. I don't need separate opinions because my beliefs are their beliefs. Belief in an America not manipulated by elites like you." She turned to the audience, her voice soaring. "I'm loyal to Trump because he's loyal to us. Laugh at that if you want, but your laughter can't drown out our voices." Kimmel, now visibly floundering, managed a weak, "You're very passionate, Leavitt." Leavitt lifted her phone high. Jim," she said, her voice radiating strength. "Millions are sharing this story, not because I'm a fanatic, but because they see themselves in me. That's not fanaticism. That's power. That's loyalty. And that's something you'll never understand." Carrey stood silently now, his sketchpad forgotten, the caricature already feeling like a relic from a lost battle. Kimmel leaned forward, desperate, his smile forced, his eyes sharp. "Leavitt, you've done well, I'll give you that," he said, his voice dripping with something darker. "You're a young woman in politics, a real MAGA star, as your fans say. But be honest, don't you feel like you're just decoration for Trump's image? A pretty face to soften the edges?" Carrey seized the moment, his voice faux friendly. "Leavitt, I get it," he said, grinning. "Politics is a big stage, and you're the perfect prop. Beautiful, young, ready to be a backdrop for the boss. Women like you are just good for show, right?" Leavitt sat there, hands resting lightly on her chair, her gaze steady and fearless, like a general surveying the battlefield before the final charge. Kimmel gestured, baiting her. "Leavitt, what do you think? Just a pretty face for Trump?" Leavitt rose, microphone in hand, her voice ringing out. Powerful, unshakable, inspiring. "Jimmy," she said, locking eyes with him. "You think I'm just decoration?" Leavitt repeated, her tone brimming with strength. "I'm the youngest woman to run." The White House press room, facing the global media, shaping America's narrative. "I don't play backdrop, I lead." She turned sharply to Carrey, her eyes tearing through the caricature like a blade. "And you, Jim? You think MAGA women are just for show? I've stood in high-stakes briefings, fighting for truth, while you stand here holding a brush, painting lazy stereotypes. Women like me, from Elise Stefanik to Melania Trump, we're not posing for props. We're rewriting history." Leavitt stepped forward, closer to the audience, her voice rising, full of fiery passion. "You call me Trump's doll? I'm the voice of millions, mothers, teachers, entrepreneurs, who don't need Hollywood's approval to shine. We're not here to prettify anyone's image. We're here to fight, to lead, to change." She paused, her gaze sweeping the crowd, inviting them to stand with her. "MAGA women aren't props, we're fired, and that fire is burning." Kimmel, scrambling to regain control, cut in. "Leavitt, I don't mean to offend, but don't you think your role is a bit overhyped? Women in MAGA are just part of Trump's machine. Right?" Leavitt strode to Kimmel's desk, her eyes like a gathering storm. "Overhyped, Jimmy," she said, her voice slicing through the room. "I've broken historic records. I stood at the White House podium. I led the national media at 27. That's not a machine. That's my power, the power of women like me." She pointed directly at him. "And you? What do you do? Besides reading scripts and thinking women are only good for show?" Leavitt raised her hand, commanding the stage. "MAGA women don't need you to define us. We define ourselves, and we're shaping America." The audience roared in approval. Laughter, now aimed squarely at Kimmel, who sat back, his fingers tapping nervously against the desk. Desperate, Carrey jumped in. "Leavitt, but women like you are just tools to help Trump win votes. Don't you see you're being used?" Leavitt turned, her voice booming. "Tools, Jim. I'm the woman who stood tall when the world tried to tear me down. I turned the press room into a battlefield, and I won. Trump doesn't use me. He trusts me as I trust him." She turned back to the audience, her voice full of rising inspiration. "MAGA women aren't used. We're a force. We're the future, and we don't need your pity." Kimmel, face tight, forced a brittle smile. "Leavitt, you're truly impressive," he said, but his eyes betrayed total defeat. Leavitt sat down slowly, still locking her gaze on the two stunned comedians, as if to say without words, "I've won." Overwhelmed by her dominance, Kimmel tried to salvage the show with a weak joke, but his voice was hollow. His eyes betrayed panic and helplessness. Carrey, standing silently by his sketchpad, packed up his final caricature, now just a crumpled, useless piece of paper. As the show ended, clips of Leavitt's fiery showdown exploded across social media. Within hours, videos of her takedowns were everywhere, racking up tens of millions of views. From her clapbacks about youth to her powerful stand for MAGA women, the MAGA community turned every moment into a rallying cry. Memes flooded in, a shot of Kimmel with his head down captioned, "When Leavitt shuts you up." An image of Carrey by his sketchpad labeled, "Out of time, Jim, TikTok." TikTokers danced to MAGA-themed tracks, overlaying Leavitt's quote, "Women don't play backdrop, we lead," but Leavitt didn't rest. Opening her phone, her eyes blazing, she scrolled through the storm she had ignited. With a carefully crafted post, she wrote, "Kimmel and Carrey thought they could make me a punchline, but I represent millions who refuse to bow to Hollywood. Thank you for standing with me." The post included a highlight reel of her 4 devastating takedowns, and within minutes it soared to millions of likes, shared from housewives in Ohio to truckers in Texas. The MAGA community pressed harder. They dug up Kimmel's old controversial comedy bits called sexist by critics. They unearthed Carrey's caricatures once slammed as offensive. One viral comment read, "Kimmel dares call Leavitt a mascot? Look at yourself." Another meme showed Carrey trying to draw Leavitt, only for her to redraw him as a clown, captioned, "Who's the real joke?" MAGA TikTok groups launched challenges, urging users to recreate Leavitt's legendary studio lines. One young girl from Florida posted a viral video mimicking Leavitt's voice. "I don't need Hollywood's approval." It hit 1 million views in hours. Meanwhile, Kimmel tried to counter, posting, "Fun night." Leavitt's tough, but it was all jokes, folks. But the post was buried under a tidal wave of MAGA comments. "Joking? She knocked you out, Jimmy." Leavitt won hands down. Carrey tried to recover too, posting a new caricature of Leavitt as a social media queen. But it backfired, hard. One commenter wrote, "Jim, put the brush down, she's won." Carrey's engagement plummeted. Leavitt kept skyrocketing. Some Hollywood stars, like Stephen Colbert, rushed to defend Kimmel and Carrey. Colbert posted, "Leavitt's good at arguing, but comedy is art, not war." But MAGA fired back just as fiercely, calling him an elitist hypocrite. Leavitt, seizing the moment, posted again, "Hollywood thinks they can lecture us on art? We're the art of truth and strength." She paired it with a powerful photo, her standing defiantly center stage, and it racked up millions more shares. Meanwhile, left-leaning journalists scrambled to write op-eds defending Kimmel and Carrey, branding Leavitt as Trump's aggressive mouthpiece. But their words were just whispers against the roaring MAGA storm. Leavitt, monitoring every new development, smiled quietly. She knew she hadn't just won on stage. She had reshaped the entire national narrative. The social media, wildfire Leavitt. Leavitt started after her showdown on Jimmy Kimmel Live kept growing. At just 27, Leavitt had turned Mockery into momentum, dominating social media, energizing MAGA, and standing as a beacon for millions. The Hollywood studio, once Kimmel and Carrey's battlefield, was now just a graveyard of their defeat. Kimmel, his ratings tanking, watched helplessly as viewers turned away, disgusted by his treatment of a strong woman. Carrey, scrambling to reinvent himself, saw his art exhibits canceled amid mounting controversy. One MAGA account summed it up perfectly. Leavitt didn't just win, she ended them. Meanwhile, Leavitt became MAGA's new icon, hailed as the flag of truth. The storm Leavitt sparked on Jimmy Kimmel Live had subsided, but its echoes kept ringing across America. Leavitt didn't just defeat Kimmel and Carrey on a Hollywood stage. She turned that victory into a movement, spreading through social media, television, and into the hearts of millions of MAGA supporters. Kimmel, with his ratings crashing and an apology that fell flat, became a shadow of his former self. Carrey, with his forgotten caricatures, quietly slipped away from the spotlight. But Leavitt stood firm, not just a victor, but a symbol of a new generation ready to shape the future. From her White House office, Leavitt looked out at the world, her eyes full of resolve. That night in the studio wasn't just a dazzling moment. It was the spark that lit a fire of hope for those long ignored by the elites. She had turned the mockery of her youth, her MAGA loyalty, and her role as a woman into proof of her unstoppable strength. Leavitt understood something deeper, that her true legacy lay not just in personal victory, but in her ability to unite, to inspire, and to empower. At a massive MAGA event in Florida, she stood before thousands, her voice ringing like a bell through the warm air. "Hollywood thinks they can define us," she declared, her eyes blazing with passion. "But we, the ordinary Americans, are rewriting our own story. We don't need their approval. We have the power of truth." The crowd roared back, hoisting banners high that read, "Leavitt our voice." Her victory began to reshape how people saw women in politics. Leavitt became a role model for millions, from single mothers to young entrepreneurs, who saw in her the strength and resolve they longed for. In Texas, a group of women even founded a scholarship in her name, dedicated to helping young girls pursue leadership dreams. One post read, "Leavitt isn't just a press secretary. She's a beacon for women like us. MAGA TikTokers kept spreading her message like wildfire, stitching together images of Leavitt, Elise Stefanik, Melania Trump, and other powerful women with a simple declaration: MAGA women are a force not to be underestimated. By mastering social media, Leavitt proved that the people's voice could break past the walls of traditional media. MAGA commentators praised her as the architect of truth, a new kind of leader using technology to speak directly to the people. Standing alone before the mirror in her office, Leavitt smiled. She knew deep down, her journey was just beginning. That victory on Jimmy Kimmel Live wasn't just a milestone. It was a proclamation, a statement to the world that a young woman with faith and resolve could change a nation. She looked out to the horizon where the MAGA movement was growing stronger every day and whispered with a fierce smile, "We're only getting started." Leavitt's legacy would never be just a night in Hollywood. It would be a fire that burned forever in the hearts of those who believe in truth, strength, and the American spirit. The story of Leavitt's clash with Jimmy Kimmel and Jim Carrey on Jimmy Kimmel Live reflects the deep cultural and political tensions of America. Today, the battle between traditional values, the MAGA movement, and Hollywood's elites. In the face of mockery about her age, her loyalty to Trump, and her role as a woman, Leavitt didn't just defend herself. She turned those attacks into weapons of strength. She used the stage, social media, and her unshakable spirit to rally millions, forcing Kimmel and Carrey into retreat. Her story teaches us that in a divided world, every American has the power to spark change by standing firm in their beliefs and using modern platforms to connect with their communities. Like Leavitt, who turned mockery into a movement, we must face prejudice with courage and never let the elites shake our values. Her use of platforms like X and TikTok reminds us that social media can be a mighty tool for building real connections, especially when mainstream media silences too many voices. Leavitt's image now inspires countless young women across the country, and the scholarship founded in her name proves that leadership belongs to those who dare to act, no matter their age or gender. In real life, America can take a page from Leavitt's journey. Hold fast to your convictions, harness the tools of your time, and turn every challenge into a chance to rise. Subscribe to the channel to keep cheering on bold voices like Leavitt, voices that refuse to back down and fight for truth. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue to explore inspiring stories that light the path forward.